a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host. Oh, look, I'm wearing the same t-shirt from last week. Yes, I washed it. This is my official Christmas time t-shirt. I see those advertisements that show Santa drinking Coke instead of milk. Since the original formula contained cocaine, this just might Nah, not gonna go there. This is a family show after all. I think Santa actually begins his day by tanking up on coffee. Lots and lots of coffee. That's nature's form of energizing. It gets things done. And when Santa puts on that red suit, he gets things done. I need to ask Julio if he's ever gotten online orders from the North Pole, maybe a few miles south of there. If you give coffee as a Christmas present, you're giving a lot more than just coffee. You're giving motivation, drive, insight, outsight. It gets the recipient out the door and doing things. I gave my nephew a few pounds of Organic Man Coffee Trike coffee. Living up there in Virginia, he needs something to get him out the door on those cold mornings, as well as the nice ones. Organic Man Coffee Trike coffee is the best coffee in the universe. It is all organic and it is roasted right there in the back room, which is actually to the left. You can smell those beans that aren't really beans long before stepping through the door. If you love coffee, swing by 4501 McPherson to experience the nectar of the gods, the best coffee you'll ever drink. If you can't get there from there, go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. Money can't buy happiness, but it can buy coffee, and coffee will make you happy. I've gotten away from doing interviews. It's just not really my thing anymore. I've done a few in the past, and I was told I did a good job. None of those folks avoided me at conferences or made excuses not to talk to me after the interview. It's the changes in technology combined with changes in me. My new computer, which is about 3 or 4 years old, doesn't support the mixer, which added all kinds of new and interesting problems. Skype decided there were no more hour-long recordings. My podcast platform also limited the length of my recordings. I can post as long as I wish, but I could only use their recorder for like 30 minutes. There's a whole copyright thing when dealing with other people. Who actually owns the audio? Eh, it got complicated, and I don't like complicated. Now, folks do tell me I can buy software and hardware and record the show that way, just spend more money on my hobby. I already have a huge investment in the show, so I'll just stick to what I have and do the easy thing. After trying to work around, over, under, etc., all these fun things, I decided to just do the show of me talking. Also, I don't have to rearrange my schedule in order to accommodate other folks. This show is kind of an interview. I talked to this guy and he told me his story, and I wrote it down. And now I'm going to tell it to you. I like to travel once in a while and go to Bigfoot conferences, UFO and get-togethers, paranormal locations. I drive or I don't go. Me and TSA have a thing. They think I'm a crook and I think they're a bunch of idiots. Who's right? Anyway, people on airplanes are beginning to act like they're the only ones there. If you sit behind me and you stick your foot over the armrest, I'm going to get artistic with a Sharpie. You might wake up with black toenails. One thing I do just about every location is I visit the local coffee shop. I go there to kind of compare them to the organic man, see if they come close or not. On a scale of 1 to 10, so far I've found a few nines. Unfortunately, I've found a few threes also. I met this guy at a coffee shop. He was old and he looked like he just worked out way too much at the gym and he was now paying the price. When I say he was old, he was older than I am. He wasn't out of shape, but he was living in an old man's body. He began talking. Of course, I asked him if he had ever seen a ghost or a UFO. The reaction wasn't quite what I was looking for. I was looking for subjects for my book, not something for the show. The guy's name was Nick. He never gave me a last name. He said he traveled a lot and he was really looking forward to getting home and relaxing a whole lot. He said he enjoyed seeing the sights, but his big thing came when he put on his red suit. I did ask him if he was Santa, to which he said, kind of. He didn't have a beard or long white hair. He was just a little bit overweight, but nothing over the belt. Nick said he was very much a human being, just like me. He said Santa is more like a big magical elf that lives in our world and outside of it at the same time. Some of that good old theoretical physics stuff that I pretend to understand anytime it comes up on my podcast. Nick said he was one of many who during the Christmas season portrayed the big guy to help spread the joy of the season. He got busy telling me his adventures in Santa. He said he didn't intend to dress like the big guy. He didn't really have any reason to. His favorite holiday was Halloween. All over the world, folks were doing a great job of impersonating Santa so kids could get their photos taken and whisper their heart's desires in Santa's ear without having to get frostbite. Nick said that he would be Nick said that I would be shocked by some of the requests from kids that actually yearned for things like jet fighters, live tigers, new family members, old family members to disappear. All manner of requests that were far beyond Santa's capabilities. There was a glut in people dressing up to spread the Christmas spirit. It all started with the Salvation Army during the Great Depression. People were hungry, so the Army sent out men, Salvation Army, sent out men dressed up in red suits to collect food or money for other people. Department stores got in on the scene, and soon Santa was being spotted everywhere. Some of them are lacking. Nick said he was asked by his best man, Dave, to come by the house dressed as Santa so his kids could have a thrill. They worked together in law enforcement. This will have relevance later on in the story. Just a quick knock at the door, hand out a few gifts, get some photos taken, and leave. Well, Nick's wife heard the plan and said, "Hey, you can do the same thing for the nieces and nephews." Nick was kind of stuck. He owed Dave for being at the wedding, and he tried to keep his wife happy, so he agreed. What can possibly go wrong? Nick told me it was a warm night as he dug that red suit out of the trash bag it was stored in. Dave had borrowed it from a guy at work who had borrowed it from someone else and had forgotten to return it. The suit was handed around without anyone having any idea on who actually owned it. Nick had the suit in the bag and in the back of his van. At around 10 p.m., he slipped outside to change into the suit. It was a warm night, and that suit, along with a pillow for padding, made the night very warm. The beard was itchy, and the wig made seeing near impossible. Each family had supplied a gift, small gift, to hand out to the kids. The plan was for them to be small enough to fit inside the big red sack. Well, somebody decided to buy a drum set. It was huge. It was bigger than Santa and the bag combined. Nick struggled to get into the red suit and all the bits and pieces that had to go with it, working in the dark, standing on the sidewalk by the fence. He managed to get dressed without being spotted by any kids. The police did drive by and wave. It took longer than planned, but eventually Santa was on the scene. Nick said he felt as much like Santa as he did having a root canal. He put the bag over his shoulder and he drug the drum set up the driveway. At the door, Nick took a deep breath, thought about just ringing the bell and running, and then stood there and prayed it would end soon. The door swung open and the kids went nuts, yelling and screaming and hugging and pulling. Nick was drugged through the door, and now for the presents. Nick wore glasses. It was hotter inside than it should have been, especially with that big red suit and his glasses fogged up. All those presents had tiny little labels. To get the right present to the right kid, he simply held it up over his head and let the parents identify it by the wrapping. It took about 6 hours, which was actually 10 minutes, before Nick could make a break for the door. He left a trail of sweat drops on the driveway. It would have been way too much trouble to get undressed, drive over to Dave's house, get redressed, do the whole Santa thing again, so Nick just jumped behind the wheel and drove over dressed in the red suit. He rolled down the windows to get some air inside. It was like driving a sauna. Who's going to be out at 10:20 at night on Christmas Eve? At a red light, Nick sat there waiting. From up the street, he heard someone yell, "Look, it's Santa!" Nick turned to look, and here came about 15 kids from 8 to 12 years old running at him. "Oh, no, now what do I do?" he thought. He looked up at the light, hoping it would change soon. It did. So Nick acted as if he hadn't seen the kids and drove away. Nick said that to this day, he hopes those kids didn't all become atheists or grow up hating the world. He said he had no idea how to handle the situation, so he had simply winged it. I do wonder what those kids thought seeing Santa driving away into the night. Arriving at Dave's house, Nick was now not only overheated, he was a bit confused about what he should do. Just to add a bit of fun to the whole situation, he needed the bathroom. He'd been drinking coffee all night, and now it was time to do something with it. Nick rang the bell, yelled ho ho ho, handed out presents as fast as he could, then ran and jumped in his van and drove away. He had totally forgotten about posing for any photos or even saying Merry Christmas. The suit went back in the garbage bag, and Nick wound up collapsed on the couch the rest of the night. He swore he was never, ever, ever going to do anything like that again. The following year, Dave had moved to a new town. The red suit had vanished from anyone's knowledge. Everybody at work knew the story of a Santa suit being handed around, but nobody knew where it was or who owned it. Nick was greatly relieved until his wife said, "You can rent one at the rental shop just down the street." Nick drove to check it out. Sure enough, they rented a Santa suit that wasn't too nasty and it wasn't that expensive. Nick was going to avoid all the mistakes from last year, hopefully. This suit was stored in an actual garment bag, but it reeked of cigarette smoke. Not knowing what he was doing, Nick hadn't bothered to open the bag and air things out. This time it was cold out, real cold. In Virginia, it can get down to 0 and people still wander around outside. Here in Laredo, 45 degrees is freezing and nobody goes out. It was around 45 degrees where Nick lived, and he had to get dressed on the sidewalk next to his pickup. With nothing to sit on, Nick wound up on his back on the cold cement trying to get those boots on. It was a struggle. This time at the door, his glasses really fogged up worse than ever. The presents were handed out and photos were taken. Later, his nephew told him that he'd missed Santa. Well, that's okay. Grown-ups don't have to have a face-to-face with the big guy. Over the next few years, Nick rented that same suit several times. He got to know everybody at the store because he had also rented other things there. He tried to act like Santa no matter what he was renting, and everybody at the shop seemed to appreciate it. Remember I said Nick was in law enforcement? He wound up arresting the guy that ran the rental store, the one who owned the Santa suit. Totally unrelated. A guy was caught in flagrante delicto, or in flagrant disregard, and Nick was the one that made the collar. When recognition set in, they both felt just a bit weird. To arrest somebody you know is weird. When they try to lie about their name, it gets even weirder. Later that year, Nick told his wife that he could no longer rent the suit because, well, all the bad feelings that came up after the arrest. Folks you know think they can commit all kinds of crimes and you'll simply look the other way. It doesn't work that way. A good cop is going to arrest a bad person no matter who they are. Not to be deterred, Nick's wife said, "Why not just buy a suit, since you're gonna need it for years to come?" Nick was so hoping to be at the end of this adventure, but no, the cards he had been dealt said nay, nay. He was destined to play Santa for years to come. The choices in suits are many. You can get real fur, boots that are actually boots. You can get a fat suit. Makes you look, well, fat. Nick did his best to buy a good suit without going into debt. As Dave Ramsey says, act your wage. No, Dave Ramsey was not Nick's best man. They're two different Daves. The next time Nick put on the suit, it felt different, he said. He wasn't looking forward to dressing up, but once in the outfit, Nick said he felt kind of magical. He put much more into his ho, ho, ho. He smiled and handed out presents to the whole gang, even getting a few things for the adults. The kids all believed that he was the real Santa. And Nick said he kind of thought so himself. He wound up visiting a hospital to help boost the patients' morale. Guys at work all thought that this was just way too weird. Nick was not the one you thought of when you thought of Santa. He wasn't a nasty piece of work. He's just not a Christmassy kind of guy. Like I said, he kind of liked Halloween better. He was the guy that went out of his way to scare people and make their lives interesting. Each year, Nick began to look forward to doing the Santa thing. He had a special garment bag to keep the suit in, and he took everything out on a regular basis to make sure it was all ready. Sprayed it with some air freshener and made sure there weren't any stains anywhere. Cookies and things, you know. He added things to make life easier. The Santa suit didn't have any pockets. So Nick went and he bought a little bag and he put it on the belt. Kind of like a bat belt kind of thing. Kids always hand him notes and little trinkets and things to remember them by, and so now everything could go in this little pouch and he didn't have to find some place to put it. Nick would place these in the pouch and then store them away once he got home. He said he has a filing cabinet that is full now. As folks around town heard about Nick and his suit, plus he was cheap, as in he didn't charge for his visits. People would contact Nick and ask if he could come by the house and do the Santa thing. Nick said that it went something like this. The weeks leading up to Christmas, people he didn't even know would call the house. It would go something like this. Ring, ring. Hello? Yes. Is this the guy who dresses up, like, well, that guy with the capital S? Not Superman, the other guy? I heard from somebody that you might come by, say, Thursday at 8, hand out a few gifts for my kids. It's a good thing Nick had gotten a Garmin for one Christmas. You know the commercial. Look, there's a moose. Give me a noose. I'm lost again. Where's Highway 10? This isn't good. A bad neighborhood. Went to buy a wreath. She's got no teeth. Ding, dong, ding, dong. Well, Nick would enter the address, sit in the passenger seat, his wife would drive, and they would spread happiness and joy to kids. Presents were usually either hidden in the bushes or in the back of a pickup truck near the house. It was something of a shock to ring the bell and come face to face with people he didn't know. And everybody acted as if this was a normal thing. By the end of the week, he might have a handful of gift cards or sometimes a few dozen packages of cookies, which he ate. People all gave something for his trouble. Nick said things got really interesting when he was asked to visit the women's shelter. Christmas is going to come once a year, no matter what circumstances you find yourself in. Kids are not going to think, we'll just hold off on the whole presents under the tree until life gets sorted out. Right. There are only supposed to be a few kids at the shelter, and so it shouldn't take too long. It was to be a small party, the kids getting gifts, and everybody singing a few songs, and then Nick could leave. Nick said he showed up ahead of time so he could get into the costume and into character. Think happy thoughts, eat some candy, drink some coffee, not too much. Clear his mind, eat a few cookies, get ready to make magic. The folks running things got a little behind. Nick sat in the office for about an hour, slowly warming up. Literally. There's still no cooling device for those suits. Look kind of like the astronauts carrying that little briefcase that has an air conditioner. Nope, sit and sweat was the only thing to do. At long last, it was showtime. Nick stepped out the door into about 100 and some kids, all running at him in what looked like a scene from a war movie, yelling and screaming and charging headlong as if their very being hinged on getting to Santa first. None of the adults were doing anything to stop them. Nick thought about running for the door, but that would have been wrong. Safe, sane, but wrong. He smiled and waved and tried to not get knocked off his feet by the wave of charging children. The wall behind him helped keep him on his feet. Questions were asked. Are you the real Santa? Followed by, do you remember my name? Where's Rudolph? What did you bring me? On and on. It was so loud and there were so many questions that Nick just waved and smiled. The kids couldn't have heard any answers anyway. Finally, one of the folks in charge suggested Nick, or rather Santa, walk around to the patio and take a seat on the other side. As he went, kids got sorted out and wound up sitting back with their families. The chair was a blessing after just a few minutes on his feet. Nick was now able to focus on the few kids that were still with him. One asked if he remembered her name. Not having the slightest inkling of who she might be, Nick did what he thought might work. Use out of this world names like, your name is Hortense, or Batsakan, or Ermengelido, and Aganzanka. The kids were so busy laughing, most of them forgot what their questions had been. Of course, there were the doubters. If you're really Santa, what did you bring me last year? Nick had no idea how to handle this one, so once again, he went with the impossible and the bizarre. You, young man, got a saber-toothed tiger. Or, you got an Apache helicopter. Of course, the kids would deny that that's what they got, but with all the laughter and other kids saying, you got a helicopter, well, the questions were pretty much drowned out. Everybody knows Santa loves cookies. Cookies with milk. And, that's an entire food group all by itself. Those great big soft chocolate chip cookies, you know the kind, the ones that just come out of the oven. You can make them as big as you want. Real whole milk, not that goat milk stuff and not soy milk. Real moo juice. Well, kids began coming over with offerings of cookies and juice. There was no milk, just juice. Nick did his best to smile and thank them for their gifts, and then he tried to eat a cookie. All that beard hair got in the way. He almost swallowed his mustache. The cookie crumbs got all over the hair, and this led to quite a mess. A 2-year-old has more style consuming food than Nick did at that momentous occasion. Unfortunately, as kids saw other kids taking Santa cookies, they got in it as well. Nick didn't have anywhere to put all these snacks, so he pulled his hand to his mouth, made yummy noises, and surreptitiously shoved the cookies down the collar of his coat. The belt around the waist kept everything in place. The sweat turned everything to a gooey mess. By the end of the night, about 3 hours later, Nick was able to slip out the door. He asked his wife to drive, and he rode on the passenger seat, still in costume. Once home, he went into the shower before unbelting the coat and shaking out all of those wet cookies. He said it looked like there was at least 20 or maybe 30 cookies on the floor of the shower. It was only a few days until Nick was going to do the Santa thing for the family, so he could only shake out the residue and smell like stale cookies until December 25th. As we talked, well, mostly Nick talking and me listening, he would get a dreamy, faraway look any time he talked about the suit and how it would change how he felt. He said it was as close to being possessed as you could get without all the split pea soup and head spinning stuff. I was a little skeptical. Don't get me wrong, I am all into paranormal things. I had no reason to not believe the story, but buying a magical suit from a mail order company is a whole lot hard to swallow. I asked how much the suit had cost, and he said it was about $50 back in 1995. Did you order a magic suit? I asked, and he said no, it was just a regular Santa suit. It didn't start to get weird until he had used it. He said it was just a normal suit till he put it on. A weird suit that he bought for $50 from some mail order company that just happened to also be magical. Yes, Nick got a dreamy look in his eyes. One day, as I was putting the suit on, I realized I was not so much putting on a costume as putting on a personality. I didn't just look like Santa, I felt like Santa. I was jolly, something I would never have been described as before. Normally, when I walk into a room, most folks get a bit uneasy because, well, I look and I act like the law. Once in the red suit, kids, even adults, would smile and laugh and run to me wanting a hug. They all began to believe I was the real deal, the big guy himself. Kids began to say things like, "This is the real Santa, not like that other guy that pretended to be him." Nick sat for a few minutes, not saying anything, and I felt like I needed to let him think. He finally said, "You know what? That suit absorbed the spirit from the kids who believed and then stored it inside itself. Then it releases it back to those not sure. like a capacitor. It takes in and gives out happiness. So it really is a magical suit. Do kids act the same when you're not in the suit? I asked. Not even close. Most kids look at me as if I'm going to try stealing their candy. I've had kids burst into tears just 'cause I got too close. It's only when I'm in the suit that kids believe I'm Santa and not just some government thug. By this time, I'm thinking I've either found the real Santa or this guy is off his meds. He looked like a tired old man who wanted to tell a story that was probably all made up. But you never know. I've heard so many outlandish tales that simply could not be true that turned out to be very much real. I've heard some folks telling about things they did only to discover they're not one with the truth. There was this one guy I used to work with. Ah, never mind, that's another show. Simply because a story is way too fantastic doesn't make it false. It's a hard road to travel to find the nonfiction in everybody's life. People who lie all the time get so good at it, they seem to believe their own nonsense. If you tell a story enough times, it becomes a part of you. It becomes you. You become the lie. Nick wasn't finished. He took a long pull of his magic elixir, known as coffee, and he said, "The other day, I saw some guy dressed up like Santa riding on a sleigh traveling down the middle of the street." Ah, great. He really is delusional. "It was mounted on the back of a big truck." Oh, I guess that could happen. As he watched the lights coming his way, it made him think, there's another guy with a magical red suit. Like we're brothers. Brothers in Christmas. Or brothers in Santa. As the truck got closer, he saw a huge sign saying, "Vote for some crooked politician who's probably lying today like they did last month." Okay, it didn't say all that, but it was a political stunt. This guy has no business using Santa as a way to get votes. It's just not right. It's bad enough to see those Coke advertisements, but at least soda isn't lying to you much. Not right at all. Nick said he figures that guy in the suit was just some guy that put the red outfit on and he was a poser. Nick was mad when he said all this, but he got over it real quick. He also said the other day he was doing the Santa thing at a school. He said he was going from classroom to classroom, destroying the little piece that the teachers had, but making the kids happy. He said once he was in the room, most of the teachers would get into the spirit as well. He said he thought that the magic was getting to them too. As he was making his way from one grade level to the next, he saw another Santa walking along about 50 feet behind him. At first, he said he thought it was a doppelganger. He had a suit. It was well made. It looked like it had been tailored for him. He gave the guy a wave, but the guy didn't wave back. Maybe it was just some guy in a suit. Maybe he didn't have a magic suit like Nick had. He later heard kids talking about the second Santa. They said that guy was a fake. This is the real Santa, and they would pat Nick on the arm or hug him. Somebody had double booked a Santa visit at the school. I asked if Nick was hired to do his visits, and he said he never made a dime. Some guys charge as much as $300 an hour to play Santa. Making money pretending to be somebody else is way too close to identity theft. The one thing that would really make Christmas visits better was a cooling suit, something to keep the inside of the Santa suit cool so he didn't nearly pass out from heat exhaustion at the end of the day. He said by the time he took the suit off, he would pour the sweat out of the boots. Nick was slowly running out of stories to tell, and his coffee cup was empty. I had things I needed to do as well, and so we said our goodbyes, and it felt kind of weird to say I'll see you later, figuring I would probably never run into Nick again. Neither of us was in our hometown. We walked out into the parking lot, and Nick got into a bright red pickup. It had a Rudolph nose and antlers on the roof. He waved, he put the truck in gear, and he vanished. 1 second he was there, and the next, poof. Maybe I blinked. The sun was in my eyes. I did turn and look away for a second, and maybe I was distracted longer than I had thought. I didn't actually see him vanish. He just wasn't there anymore in a big hurry. I'm pretty sure he simply drove away and I missed it. My take on all of this is like what Nick said. Santa is a real being who brings joy to kids, as well as a few adults, all over the world. People who dress up like him can take on the spirit through some form of magic that is stored inside those red suits, but not all of them. Some are just red suits. The magic of Santa comes from inside of us, and this is something that nobody should attempt to take away. The true meaning of Christmas is to remember not baby Jesus being born on whichever day it was, but what Jesus the adult had told us. Stop thinking Christmas is all about getting presents and start treating other people the right way. If, now, mind you, this is only speculation on my part, if I was going to dress up like Santa, I sure wouldn't go with the fat Coca-Cola look. I'd be more like the Kurt Russell from Christmas Chronicles. That is a neat looking suit. Yes, I've looked into it, and no, I'm not going to buy one. They cost way too much money for a 1 day a year thing. Kind of like the Coal Shack Night Stalker Halloween costume. That's a lot of money for 1 night a year. I'm into Christmas and all, but I'm also on a budget. As for the politically correct folks out there, it's Merry Christmas, not Happy Holidays. No seasoned greetings, not a holiday tree. It's not a winter festival. It's Merry Christmas, and that's how it should be. We were at Hobby Lobby, I think it was last year. My wife likes to go there and look at all the neat new decorations, and she usually buys a whole lot of few. As we were checking out, I looked at all the unhappy shoppers. It looked like everybody was there for an IRS audit. Me being me, I said in a very loud voice, "Hey, what's up, people? It's Christmas time. Y'all should be happy. You should be smiling. Act like you're enjoying life." Well, a lot of people did start to smile, and a lot of them were laughing. Probably at me, but I don't care. I said, even if you're not happy, at least act like you are. Well, that did get a few people chuckling, and a lot of people all of a sudden they looked like they had pulled themselves out of their selves. It's kind of like a Bigfoot sighting. People have reported seeing Santa throughout the years. Bill's first sighting happened in 2002, followed by additional encounters in 2004 and in 2007. He believes he actually saw Santa not once, but 3 times. The first time was Christmas Eve in 2002. His parents had invited some friends and family over for dinner, the Christmas Eve get together. After too much talking and grown up things, Bill decided to go to his room and watch TV. Well, being Christmas Eve, there's not a whole lot on outside the usual movies and specials. Bill was bored and he decided to just walk around the house and be a teenager. As Bill was walking towards the window at the end of the hall, he saw a tall, fat figure scurrying along near the other end, about 20 feet away. The man was crouched down low to the floor, but he was wearing a Santa suit. Bill didn't believe in Santa. That was little kid stuff. Babies needed Santa, but not him. However, there was a strange man in the house, dressed up like Santa. Bill went downstairs to the living room and he quickly realized that everyone was there. So who was the guy upstairs? Bill told his dad there was some strange guy in a Santa suit sneaking around upstairs. His dad laughed and said, "Right, well, it must be Santa then." Bill got very embarrassed as word spread of his encounter, but he stayed in the living room, not wanting to run into this intruder again. Number two occurred again on Christmas Eve in 2004. Bill said he remembered it more vividly than the first one. He was laying on the couch in the living room. His parents were in the kitchen doing grown-up things, talking about business and school and things kids didn't find the least bit interesting. Out of the corner of his eye, Bill saw a huge man, about 7 or 8 feet tall, crawl under the tree and then vanish. Just before the guy disappeared, he turned and he looked right at Bill, held one finger up to his lips, and went, "Shh." Bill jumped from the couch and ran to the kitchen. He stayed in the corner, not listening to the grown up things, but not wanting to be alone. Picture this: Christmas 2007. Well, it was Christmas 2007. Bill was walking through his house when he saw a man dressed as Santa walk by at the end of the hall. Bill ran to see who it was and what they were doing, but there was nobody there. There was nowhere to hide and no doors to go through. Carrie said in 1961 she went to bed on Christmas Eve and was awoken by her bedroom door slowly creaking open. Light from the hallway flooded her room. Standing in the doorway was a big, corpulent man in a red suit, with a stocking cap and black boots. His beard and hair were very white, almost glowing. Carrie looked at this individual, and the only thing she could think of was, "This is Santa." He stood there looking around the room and then slowly pulled the door shut again. Carrie was so surprised she just lay there, not thinking to go see who might be in the hallway. Eventually, she fell asleep. The next morning, she asked her father, or maybe mother, had been moving about the house. Her mother said no, nobody was up all night. They had all slept through the evening. Not wanting to have her mother think she was making things up or maybe dreaming too much, Carrie never told anybody about her late night encounter. Sarah was sleeping on the floor. Her aunt was visiting for the holidays and had been given the use of her bedroom, and Sarah didn't much like the idea of sleeping with an adult, so she opted to lay on the floor. Sleeping on the floor can be trying, and Sarah was having issues getting comfortable. She rolled over and looked towards the door. As she did, she spotted light coming from the crack at the bottom. It was white and gold, and it glittered. Well, this was some kind of a magic, and she wanted to see more, so she opened the door. A huge man dressed in a red suit was standing right outside. Santa looked at her and said she should get back to sleep. Kids aren't supposed to be awake this late, and they sure aren't supposed to see him while he's working. Sarah, being young, said she couldn't sleep, to which Santa said, then just pretend like you're asleep. Close your eyes and act like you're asleep. Sarah took this more as an order, and before she knew it, the sun was up. Having an encounter like this tends to stay with you, and Sarah still believes today that she had seen Santa in the hallway. Dick was 37 at the time of his encounter, not the age of somebody who might believe in a magical being who delivers presents on Christmas Eve, but still, some of us adults have faith in things that the rest of y'all need to work on. Look at how many people believe in honest politicians, and they think we're the ones that are delusional. Dick was a little old to believe in Santa, but he had the faith there was something magical about the holidays. Dick stepped outside to empty the garbage can. He walked across the parking lot, opened the dumpster. The can passed its contents to the bigger, smellier container, and then Dick walked back to his apartment. As Dick was walking, he passed an older man. This guy had long white hair, a white beard down to his belly. He was wearing a green flannel shirt with blue jeans. Aside from the beard and the hair, there was little Santa-y about the guy. Dick was surprised when this older guy said, "Hello, Richard," and then kept walking. Dick thought about it a bit, and he realized he did not know anyone who looked like this guy. Well, Dick kept watching the guy walking away down the sidewalk. What was a bit weird was as the old guy got to the intersection, the light changed immediately when he got there and let him cross. He didn't have to push the button and wait. It just changed on its own. Is Santa real? Those of you who say no are simply denying your inner child. The same folks who think buying themselves an extravagant gift is okay because they deserve it, while at the same time handing out cheap nonsense gifts to others, those are the people that don't really believe in Santa. Santa isn't so much a corporeal being as a spirit that can make people happy, and they'll let him. Yes, he's a he. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been started out life as Nicholas. If you enjoyed tonight's show, if you did, spread it around. Spread around the Christmas joy and cheer as well. It's not about receiving presents. It's about getting together with others, having a good time, and trying your best to remember that Jesus was only a baby for a very short period of time. He had a lot of important things to say, and we should listen to what he had to tell us. For those that don't believe in Jesus, too bad. For the rest of y'all, Merry Christmas. Until next time, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where there's strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.